опустится, да, тогда Маша сидит в центре, это логично. Я тогда сбоку. Мы с тобой ты тогда справа от Маши, а она наша будет
тут вже виставлена англійська мова, якщо відповідно. Окей. Колег, доброго дня.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Just a small announcement. Part of the speakers perhaps will speak English. That's why if anybody needs the translation or the equipment for the simultaneous translation, so please approach our sound engineers and they will issue you those pieces of equipment. Thank you.
Колеги, ну будемо починати.
We are going to start our discussion, esteemed colleagues. Now we are going to have a presentation of the result of the research carried out by the Center Economic Strategy. Whether should the gas price be market-oriented? Speakers are Tomas, Fiala, and Miklos, who are the co-founders of the Center for Economic Strategy. The research proper will be presented by Repko, Deputy Director of the Center for Economic Strategy. Also, the speakers include today Glib Vyshlinsky, Executive Director of the Center, and Andriy Boytsun, Research Director. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to Glib, who is going to be the moderator of the discussion. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. And now, first of all, for about up to 10 minutes, our co-founders, Tomas, Fiala, and Miklos, will say a few words why actually this idea to create our center, and then we'll switch over to the presentation of our first analytical note why the gas price must be a market, whether the gas price must be market-oriented. And this will be presented by the Deputy Director, Repko, and then we'll be open to questions regarding the results of our first research. The floor is given to Tomas. Thank you, Gleb. Good afternoon to everyone. The idea to create this think tank, the Center for Economic Strategy, actually was born in the beginning of this year. And myself and my colleagues in Ring Capital for the last 18 months were very active in participating in different processes taking place in Ukraine, starting from the end of 2013. Whatever happened in the confrontation, let's say, or the aggression of Russia in relation to Ukraine. In December last year, when, as a result of parliamentary elections and the, let's say, renovation of the cabinet of ministers, they come into the power where the majority portion, but quite a few young progressive people from business, from the civil society, and we actually sensed quite a great demand from these people for the knowledge support, expertise, for the human resource support, and many of new ministers or heads or managers of the public companies, if they were changed, for example. They asked our company and many other, the big four, the legal companies, they were seeking the support to be supported by the personnel. You know, first they asked for a couple of people for 3 months or half a year. It became obvious that that demand was going to be there for quite a long period of time, and if myself, my colleagues would like to continue to render this kind of support, it would be reasonable to create something for a long time or long-term nature, which would be not ad hoc, but which would be on a permanent basis, operating to provide support to all those progressive forces which gradually, slowly, but entered the authorities in Ukraine. Since in the beginning of the last year, I made the acquaintance with Miklos, actually in March 2014, when went together with the leaders in reforms from the Central and Eastern European countries, came here to support Ukraine and tell or share their recipes of reforms which had been used before and which proved their success or not so much success in many countries of Central and Eastern Europe. So to rid Ukraine of the necessity to invent the wheel or bicycle, and so we became acquainted during the conference where the European Business Association and other organizations were the co-founders of, or co-organizers. I also knew that Ivan invented, or was there was a think tank in Slovakia in the beginning in the 1990s, which still operates. And so we met in February of that year, and I approached him seeking advice and information how this kind of think tank can operate and how to create something similar. I didn't have experience at that time. I didn't want to invent a bicycle myself. In the end of the story, I proposed to want to become a co-founder, and he gave his consent to that. Then we communicated with Vyacheslav Kirchuk, who is also a very active figure in Ukraine. He also agreed to participate in this project, and with the focus on education, because without a high quality education, I mean broad horizontally and high quality one, like in the United States, we cannot even talk about creating the elite in Ukraine who will take care of the high quality management of the country or the growth of the economy. That's why we decided to create such a think tank, and I promised and guaranteed funding, at least for the next 3 years, for such a center as part of, comprising 10 to 12 people. And we created rather high quality workstations, and we start to work. As for the directions of our work, those who share our vision, and we are not political organization, we do not support any political party. We are ready and prepared to work with any kind of politicians and technocrats or deputies, ministers, deputy ministers, reps of the state-run enterprises or companies management in any issues which correspond to our principles. Our principles is the free and open economy, is free competition, and conservative fiscal and monetary policy, and deregulation, privatization. Perhaps one will actually add something to what I've said. Perhaps I'll finish at that. I'll be happy to take your question, if any. Thank you, Tomas.
Ivan.
Yeah, thank you. Tomas said almost everything. As he mentioned, I came for the first time here in Kiev to Ukraine in March last year, just immediately after Maidan. And from that time, I'm coming regularly. From February of this year, I serve as advisor to Finance Minister and Economy Minister. I'm spending here approximately 10 days every month, which means I'm closer connected with the Ukraine and Ukrainian development. And main reason why I accepted all these offers and these possibilities is that I think Ukraine is a country with huge potential, but very far below its potential, not only today, but last 20 years at least. And it is possible and it is necessary also to unleash this potential, to use this potential. And the main reason how to do it, main method how to do it, are reforms, of course. And I have experience not only from doing reforms in my country, I served in 4 Slovakian governments, but as Tomas has mentioned, I co-created, we were more founders in 1992. We created think tank Mesa 10, which played very important role, especially in 90s, in difficult times in Slovakia at the time. And the main mission of this think tank was support reform, pro-market reform, but also to educate people, also to help people understand why reforms are necessary. And I see also here in Ukraine today big gap between support of reforms. On the general level, people support reforms. People are even dissatisfied that reforms are not going quickly enough. But then there is gap between this support on the general level and then understanding what reforms are meaning. Why, for instance, tariff deregulations are necessary, important, not only why liberalization, why deregulation, why privatization is important, and what does it mean in very concrete, very specific sectors and areas and measures which have to be done. And I hope, I'm convinced that Center for Economic Strategy can play a very important role in this education, creating public opinion, but also offering solutions, offering reforms, offering technical methods, how to speed up necessary reforms in Ukraine. It was important in Slovakia, it was very successful finally process, and I'm convinced that in Ukraine it will be successful as well. Thank you.
Thank you. На жаль, сьогодні
Unfortunately, Svetoslav Vakarchuk is not with us today because some of you probably know he's at the Yale University attending the program of the global leaders, and Tomas and Ivan have presented the idea of the center. Now I would like to introduce other colleagues, and you have brief information about center and research, but and there's also the link to the complete package of everything we present today. There's the full presentation of the research that Masha will present, and the memo, and also the detailed presentation of the center. Now I would like to give the floor to Maria Repko, Deputy Director of the Center for Economic Strategy. She's responsible for macroeconomic research of macroeconomic stability, and he was responsible for this research where the gas price should be a market-oriented, and Andriy Boytsun is responsible for the quality of research which we conduct, and he will join us in a Q&A session. And so we all together work on the tasks of the center. Masha, you have 25 minutes to make a presentation. Thank you all. I will present our report whether the gas price should be market-oriented. In our research, we looked at some items. First of all, I will talk about why the gas price, why the price for gas for population. We did not look at the tariff for transportation, for distribution. We were looking at the price for gas as a commodity. The second issue is situation in Ukraine. And the third one, Ukraine is not the first country that is implementing the gas reform, and we will look at the experience of reform of gas sector in the countries of Eastern and Western Europe. We'll talk about the impact of alternative pricing and such economic factors as corruption component, public finance, own gas production in Ukraine, energy efficiency, and social impact. And in the end, I will present conclusions. Maybe you will make your own conclusions. So what was the objective of the research? The gas is responsible for 58% of all the consumed energy in the household sector. That is a big number compared with the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. They use many other sources, solid fuel, electricity, but Ukraine is using gas. Gas is 10% of all the commodity import. Its impact on the trade balance is very big in gas, and this difference between the gas price for population and the imported price for imported gas led to the gas and budget deficit, and it became part of the reason of economic crisis in Ukraine in 2014. In Ukraine, for many years, the gas price for population was low because we have own production in Ukraine. gas production our governments managed, and there was a political will to keep prices low, and the difference between the price for gas for population and industry, between the price for gas that is imported and the gas for population, the difference was 5 times. And in 2015, the government increased gas prices. What was happening with Naftogaz? Naftogaz was profit losing. We looked at the financial reports of the company, and we see in blue, we show the gross losses of gas from wholesale of gas for population. In green, the losses of Naftogaz from wholesale gas sale to population. And we see that these two things create the hidden budget deficit. Own production in this country was not increased. In 2011-2012, when the gas price for Russian gas was very high in Ukraine, we did not increase our own production. Укргазвидобування was receiving small money for their gas, about 349 hryvnias per 1,000 BCM, and also the Укргазвидобування had to pay royalty. The company had no money to develop new fields, to enhance the volumes of production. Now, the price of Укргазвидобування is 1,500 plus hryvnias, and the company now has $23 per 1,000 BCM for their own purposes. It was profitable. It was not profitable for the industry to invest in energy efficiency technologies, and there was the energy crisis. The consumption of the industry goes down, but we see the opposite situation with the consumption by household. We see that here the consumption was not going down only in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. We see some small reduction. Consumption in communal sector, if we compare to other countries, it's 35-40% is higher than in European countries, and that's true not only about gas, but about the consumption of energy resources in general. So we see that for the population, there's no reduction of consumption, and there were subsidies, hidden subsidies. Everyone was subsidized because the gas price was very low. If we compare the price paid by the owners of a large household in Konchazaspa, for example, it's shown in green. We see that the difference is very big compared to the difference with the small private houses. I cannot tell you about the whole country, but if we compare the household, the richer households were getting more subsidies than poorer households. Communal payment is about 8% in the structure of payments. International experience, we analyze the experience of the Central and Eastern Europe. You see that in most countries the reforms of gas sector were started from regulated prices. The state property was dominating in this sector. And how did it change? There was a shift from direct management of the sector to market-oriented prices, and the state had the role of the regulator. It limited itself to creation of competitive environment, the motivation and stimulating energy efficiency, and creation of the system of social protection. If there is a shock therapy, there should be the shock and there should be the therapy. And we see that these three things together, they produced in most countries quite a positive effect. And the public finances were restored. There was the reduction of consumption, which was 20–60%. And of course, the population now pays more for communal services in Moldova. That accounted for 40% of the expenditures of the population. Now in Poland, they spend 20% of their revenues to pay for communal services, and the state was trying to compensate it via social mechanisms. The example of such comprehensive reform is the example of Poland. Poland started from the low level of income for the population. They increased retail prices 5 to 6 times. Part of the state property was privatized. Poland created the independent regulator. They approved the framework energy law, and tariffs for household were increased depending on the level of the price for imported gas. The tariffs were created according to the principle expenditures plus investment component plus profit, and that was happening for several years. In the result, the Poland saved energy by 30%. Own production of gas was increased by 7%. Unfortunately, their fields are depleted, but they still have the problem. They still don't have a competitive environment. A Polish state-owned company continues to supply 90% of gas to consumers, and the state creates some mechanism of diversification. They're trying to open the market and increase competition. Moldova's experience is of semi-reform. They started from low level of income of the population. The quasi-fiscal deficit was 6%, and Moldova depended on the import of Russian gas, almost 98%. Gazprom offered to Moldova to join the gas sector, and the Gazprom fixed the price at the level of $80 per 1,000 BCM. Then they increased it and then reduced, and now it's 385. Moldova was increasing the tariffs for the population for gas for heating, but after there was the devaluation of lei, Moldova currency, and there was no political will to balance the tariffs. And in the result, starting from 2011, the domestic tariffs were not changed. So Moldova now has 25% of the saving of energy, but they are accumulating losses because their supplier is state-owned, and they are now going on through the bankruptcy procedure. And there is a problem of Transnistria, because in Transnistria the gas price is very low and Transnistria doesn't pay any debts. Moldova has to do that. Two countries which were going similar ways, but the result is so different. If we look at the alternatives for Ukraine, the gas price, the gas as commodity. So we can look at the influence at public funding, at corruption, social effect, as spheres. that influence the prices or a difference in price between import and consumption. The impact on public funds by market prices is very transparent. That will allow to soften fiscal crisis in 2011, 2012, 13 and 14. You can see the level of the state support was growing from 1 to 5.6% of GDP. That is the budget deficit, that is the increase of the public debt. The market price will remove that disbalance. There will be no need to invest money into this big black hole. It will lead to revenues from royalty, increase of taxes, the pressure on hryvnia will be softened because eventually import should be reduced, and it can help attract foreign investors. Negative is increase of the state subsidies. Impact on corruption. Here we are talking about difference in prices. There's the possibility to speculate on the difference on price for population and industry. We get smaller cost. We took the chemical industry where gas is very sensitive commodity. Market prices will remove any preconditions for corruption. One more impact, which may seem not to be direct, that is that a big volume of gas import was feeding corruption. Market price will help reduce import, and it will help potential reduction of potential level of potential corruption. The negative is the increase of redistribution via budget. The budget will be getting some additional revenues, and the GDP redistribution will be enhanced. Own production, market price, which is $268, will allow Укргазвидобування to get to the second step of the graph. Now the current price allows to develop existing fields. They don't have money for anything else. Укргазвидобування was saying that the production could be reduced by 1 billion cubic meters per year. We calculated it to look at what happens if our own production grows by 10%, the consumption is reduced by 15-20, and we receive annually $2.5 billion. Energy efficiency, the market prices influence it because that's motivation to save. And so previously it depended whether the person installs gas meter, but now the payback period is cut down to 5 years or more. You can see the gas consumption in different countries. Ukraine is indicated in red dot, and it's lagging behind the trend. The reduction of gas consumption, like in Europe, can account for 20-60%. Besides, the market prices will stimulate competition.
Very important here to understand the energy efficiency is impossible without a normal, comprehensive environment for that. In other words, the country has to ensure the strategy on the national level and the corresponding regulatory base which is going to regulate all those things. We have to install 100% the meters, which will allow the physically for people to do something about it. We are going to take care of the energy audit, and there must be public programs to support loans, grants. It could be in the form of the tax compensation for the thermal administration. So, in general speaking, something must be done along those lines. The social effect, and we have to communicate all this. Very important here is the communication about what kind of public or state programs we have, how they can allow to decrease the consumption or decrease the payment for the gas on a monthly basis. Social effect is most controversial. Here is very important communication as well. If given the low prices of the population responsible for the level of the tax, we pay the taxes, they go to the budget for, in other words, we all pay that, and this social inequality increases because the subsidies receive those who receive more. And the distribution of those expenses or less expenditures in favor of the population with low incomes. And again, we are talking about from 8% to 8 to 23%, depending on the income level. We do not have the statistics regarding the income from the State Statistics Committee. We just calculated what categories of population are going to receive the donation or subsidies. We revealed that at least approximately 25% of people who have very low income, they will spend 7.5% of their income, or the rest will be covered by the subsidies. Half of the population between 7.5% to 15% for the communal payments, and the rest will be covered from the budget. And 25% differentiation will be between 15 and 23% according to the calculation IMF. In other words, middle class will find itself in the least beneficial situation. If the rich will not notice anything, the low-income population will get some subsidies, but the middle class will really feel the increase of the tariffs. We are talking about 2.5–3% of GDP according to IMF calculations, and the money which is required for that. And here, the population, especially with the middle-level income, those who are going to suffer most, we have to communicate with them. First of all, in the system of subsidies, there is a stimulus for energy saving. Non-consumed energy can be used for in the next period, and then we can use it for the settlement of payments. I hope that we'll have the system for the support of energy efficiency. This will ensure the high quality and the non-interrupted supply. And in the end, I would like to say that all the population will win if we do not have some fiscal crisis from the decline of hryvnia or hryvnia collapse, whatever, which will tell on us. In the end of the story, this component of our expenditures must be reduced. And the conclusion, we can see that the market-oriented price, according to our conclusions, gives us the benefits in almost everywhere, the green line, and only some of the people middle level income will be very sensitive to that, but all those green pluses can be turned into minuses, and if a reform is not completely complemented, or if we fail to use some mechanism compensators, or we forget to take into consideration something very important. For example, we have to make the increase or the tariffs for gas market-oriented, to issue subsidies, to introduce energy efficiency measures, and create the regulatory basis for creating this free competition. As a result, we can come up with a complete reform, and I hope that the government will communicate all those things in the proper way to reach some positive effect, which will be beneficial to the state, the suppliers who will have the market, who will be able to compete with each other and get some profits, in the production and recovery companies will create new jobs, etc., etc. Who is going to lose? The let's say the households with low level or middle level of income, and political lobby of those recipients. We can expect realistically very big resistance to this program. Again, we are talking about the issue of communication and all those things. And this is kind of the main message of this presentation. We have to make the whole population aware of everything. If you can give the mic to Evgeny, and you have a chance to ask questions, maybe somebody will voice their own opinions regarding our study. Evgeny Solnin, Radio Freedom. Radio Liberty, I'm sorry. According to your forecast, what would be the medium balanced, weighted price if you're talking about the share of this gas in the market and high price for the imported gas? Can tariff actually be associated not with the cost of the this gas, but the medium cost of the imported and gas and this gas? Okay, I'll start with the forecast and then come back to your question. Forecast due to the decline in the price for the oil, we cannot even prognosticate what will be the gas price. Maybe it will go down a bit. And we remember we showed the different steps or tiers, how much Ukraine has to get, how much money get for gas in order to preserve this level or increase the level of the production of its own production. As far as I know, now there is some audits in place, and people just thinking how much money they will need for that. As for the prime cost or the production cost, we did not include that in our presentation in order to focus on your last question, whether the market price or the middle weighted price would be best for Ukraine. If we are talking about sensitive things regarding the differential prices, for example, corruption and consumption, excessive consumption, you can see that the market price is on the winning side in all those cases. How to protect the population from increasing the prices? I believe most reasonable is mechanism of subsidies, which will not create a social inequality or a situation when the public actually provides subsidies to the rich families who, conditionally speaking, heat up their swimming pools, but the money is saved in this way could be given to the low-income families. It can be a market price in the medium weighted, or it would be equal to the top price for the imported gas. Rather, what's gas? Gas is commodity. In other words, there is a rather clear imported price. There are some hubs in Europe. This is the market commodity, and it has market price. You'll be able to produce or to recover gas 5 times more. Maybe this this figure will be decreased, and we'll have this kind of balanced situation for supply and demand. But if we're talking about the regulation of the market, the free subject of the economy could actually establish the prices which they believe to be most reasonable for them. Just to echo the question of my colleague in the energy market, the model of the medium-weighted price, they do not have the deficit so far, but you also propose in that market to switch over to the market price. This is my first question. Number two, we know the problems of heat coming on Energo, according to which the medium household who do not have any stimuli to introduce some energy efficiency because you do not regulate your consumption. And this is the problem of post-Soviet countries where such big systems centralized, let's say district heat supply. How you are going to resolve this issue? And this last question, the risk of the lack of payments or non-payment. We heard this figure, 21% of non-payment. If it increases even more, who is going to pay for the balance? So, I'll start with the last question of yours and then give the mic to my colleagues. Speaking about the non-payments level, The public policy must conclude such a thing as possibility to disconnect those who do not pay. Just disconnection, you know. Physical, just physical to close the valve, so to say. This is a real problem, the problem which must be resolved by the state, by the government at some level, because we cannot cannot allow this problem just to be suspended in the air. This is a real problem, must be addressed in this way or another. The physical disconnection, physical restriction of gas supply. The second problem here is communication. Those people who do not pay now, do not apply for subsidies, maybe they do not know that they can obtain subsidies. We have to communicate this information to them. They must know what kind of assistance from the state they can obtain. This is an issue of communication. Another question was about the energy market, right? The matter is that we did not consider the energy market within the framework of this study. I don't think this is the topic of today's discussion. Depart from our central topic, the gas price must be market-oriented today. We have an example of Elchevsk. As a result, there was a program when the people installed their own autonomous sources, and 50% they installed the autonomous sources, and the rest, the expenses for the delivery or supply increases twofold. You know, for example, in Uzhgorod, the people, they depart from the centralized system. As far as I know, there are no plans how to break this problem or how to resolve this problem. There are no such intentions, and this is a big risk for this reform. Coming back to the previous question, what you were talking about the regulation of consumption of heating services. I mean, and what Maria was talking about, that was a problem of the too low prices when the consumers were looking whether it would be worthwhile or not worthwhile for them to install meters in each apartment or install some elementary regulation devices on their radiators. And now when our country is involved in warfare and there is financial crisis in Kiev, there was such level of heating as if we were based in luxury or whatever. And there was in other regions there was no physical possibility for that or opportunity for that. When the price becomes market oriented, when we start to compare this or another household to install regulator, for example, or the individual meter, then those calculations end up in an absolutely different conclusion. What we were talking about in our study or research, and speaking about the competitive environment, creating that. An example from different sphere in electric power supply in Germany. You know, you're talking about internet, what it takes to switch over from one internet provider to another one. Maybe he's better, he provides some, let's say, beneficial loan or whatever. Just 3 minutes, 2 clicks by a mouse, and you can change your internet provider. Well, that's what I'm talking about. This is one of the columns of the peers of a successful reform, something without which, and you were absolutely right, that it could be risk for the reform, the absence of such opportunity to develop the competitive environment. There's something which is Poland doing now. We encountered the issue of competition, the level of distribution. This is something which Ukraine has to think about. We are starting kind of discussion now, as you can see. Good afternoon. Actually, I would like to continue the topic which we discussed in the morning. Viktor Vitsitska, Samopovich, Association Secretary of the PAC. Journalists actually put you very important and specific questions regarding the reforms which have to be implemented. However, to which extent it is possible to implement them, and when we are talking about the introduction of the market-oriented gas price. We are coming to the Tepel Ukrenergo. When you're talking about the experience of Germany, I would like to remind you that at the level of the European of the energy community, it is fixed there in their charter. If I'm not mistaken, up to 2020, they will be able to provide the heat meters for all the year market, and we are talking about Ukraine. So let's immediately increase the price for gas for everybody, but the tools, the instruments for the people, how they can regulate consumption of their energy resources, we cannot ensure that. Please understand the key principled moments. We are for the market-oriented prices. Yes, we are for the free competition in order to increase and stimulate the increase of our own production.
But we have to give answer to people. What should they do? What instruments they have to control own consumption? Multi-storied buildings, which were built 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, this issue cannot be addressed within 5 minutes. It cannot be addressed even within a month. There should be a comprehensive approach. And you need to offer some solution to people today to explain how much time, what should be the steps for them to get this instrument. Very simple thing. Old houses where we may have up to 60% of pensioners, they will never be saying, let us install the meters for the whole house and we'll control the consumption. So let us move to the level of market prices for the population. For that, we need to divide the consumers by groups, where there is a possibility to put meters, where there's no possibility to put meters. So for Ukraine, this is much more comprehensive. I've never been talking about 5 minutes. And the whole presentation was dedicated to the complexity of the issue. The state policy in the sphere of the state should be developed at the national level, at the level of communities, because some people have old houses and so on and so forth. This policy should be national policy, and the state should realize what will be the problems, what are the methods of addressing the problems. They need to have instruments like the state grants. They have to communicate it. And so this is the creation of competitive environment, and the second one is support of energy efficiency, and third is subsidizing those who cannot afford.
This is a very sensitive problem and this is a very complex problem. And I agree with everything that you said, for instance, and before you. But what is the problem? If you will wait until everything will be solved, then you will do never it, because it will be not solved. Because the strongest incentive for decrease overconsumption, for impose regulators, and so on, I mean regulations on the household and so on, is market price. And this is not theory what I'm speaking about. It was the same discussion in Slovakia, the same in Poland. It was the same criticism. It was the same rejection. No, we are against because it was not fulfilled all these preconditions for to do it fair and just. But problem is that if you will wait, and I'm not saying that it is not important that state has to be able to compensate for poor people. It's obligatory of the state. But if you will wait until everything will be prepared, it will be never. And one of the main reasons of your hardship today, of your corruption, of your dysfunctional state, of everything, was regulated prices of the energy. If you look at this, if Ukraine will have energy efficiency like Poland, you will be self-sufficient in gas. You will not need any cubic meter of gas from Russia. And you know what I'm speaking about. This is about dependency, this is about currency stability, this is about everything. Which means, please, don't wait. Of course, push for your government to prepare as much as possible in conditions for contributions, in these regulators, in these fair conditions for paying, but don't wait. If you will wait, I'm afraid that it will have very, even if this analysis, the end of analysis was, everything was positive, but social effect was mixed. Yes, from short-term perspective, yes. But from longer-term perspective, if energy tariff deregulation is necessary precondition for your growth, for your competitiveness, then it will have positive social effect, not immediate. Immediately it will be negative, but even from mid and long-term perspective, it will be strongly positive for the social development, for the living of standard. Because if not, if it will be not done, if it will be postponed, then on the contrary, it will have very, very negative effect in your economic development, and then also for living of standard, of course.
Я ще додам, що ми бачили, в принципі, що від...
We saw what was happening with the consumption while the prices were low, the meters were not installed. Several governments were saying we will increase gas prices. They were not increasing gas prices. That was a political issue. But with the risk that the gas price will be increased, the level of setting the meters was the same, and the consumption did not go down. So if the gas price is not increased, the situation will remain like it is. Yuri Vitrenko, Naftogaz, Ukraine. I would like to start from thanking. Thank you for doing this very fundamental and important research. The analysis that you've made, and there are things that we were surprised with because your approach is very deep. Thank you that you are helping Ukraine to address all these global problems, and you're helping to liquidate this balance in the economy. I would like to provide some comment. This is the comprehensive problem. Let's address all the problems at the same time. I believe that we have so many problems that we need to look at them separately. For example, now when we're talking about gas price, this sense to separate the problem of tariffs for heating. These are different energy products, and there might be different approaches to solution. We can sell gas at a market price to Teplokомуненерго, and they, being natural and monopoly, they go to the regulator and they set the tariffs. Then local authorities, depending on the model of decentralization of the state, if they want, they can set lower prices for tariffs for heating. These are different things. Talking about gas, all people who consume gas for heating, they have meters and they can regulate the consumption of gas. They have the choice whether to heat a big house, to heat one room. They have a choice whether they cook some meals for cows, for example, using gas, or they can use wood for that. There are different economic incentives which will help people to save. As to heating, this is a separate sphere. We need to look at it separately. Maybe you should look at it in your next report. And I would like to finish by the question. This is to continue the questions asked by journalists. That's about market price and mixed price. And this is the question, not the comment. There are two approaches. There's approach of people who say that in the country that is importing gas, the market price is defined by it equals the import price. But there is approach when famous politician says that he calculated the price, the market price, and he knows that the market price should be not more than $140. She can calculate, and so we can calculate the market price. She can do it and define the market price. The question to you, do you believe that the market price is defined by the marginal expenditures of the import, or you believe that some good politician or accountant with the calculator can calculate the price?
As has been said already, gas is a commodity. It's a raw material which can be traded all over the world, and here we have to have international price, as you said, marginal import price, which has to determine the market-oriented price in the market to Ukraine. The Ukrainian producers have to have an opportunity to sell their gas, whatever ownership you're talking about, the private or public, at the Ukrainian market or when it is exported. The biggest sector in Ukraine or branch in Ukraine, which everybody focuses upon, is agriculture. Ukrainian wheat, maize or corn. Half of the Ukrainian harvest is exported, or another 50% could be sold at the domestic market. The domestic market, the price in hryvnia, absolutely correspond to the international market prices minus FOB and transportation prices multiplied by hryvnia dollar rate, whatever. And for the gas, we should not invent some other ways to determine the price or establish the price. If the Ukrainian wheat or corn and any other crop which is grown in Ukraine is sold in the domestic market, the same price proceeding from the global demand and supply. And gas shouldn't be an exception to this rule, this kind of political manipulation which is used because historically gas in Ukraine, so happened in Ukraine for the last 20 years, has been one of the largest sources of making politicians rich, and even more rich, who actually use their political quota in nominating their own people to the energy sector, and they regulated the domestic import market, and they made billions of dollars every year. So any person who suggests some kind of a non-market approach to this market, his or her final goal is populism in order to make money and put them into his own pocket.
A draft labor code being debated in Parliament. It hasn't been passed yet, but I just wanted to get any of your opinions if you know about the draft labor code. If not, do any of you have any opinions about whether labor legislation needs to be reformed in Ukraine and if that would have an effect on foreign investment?
I think that we could answer this question after our briefing, because it is on completely separate issue.
Alexander Vovk, volunteer.
Alexander Vovk, volunteer in sphere of energy. I have the following questions. Many are talking about the gas market and so on. Speaking about your vision, is there any limitation or restriction? There is some market, and there are some things which the country has or the state has to regulate in non-market way. There are specific examples. Number one, the commitment of the Ukrgaz to sell gas for the population consumption. Should it be any kind of restriction? So what price of the gas of Ukrgaz must be provided since October 1 in order we can allow the export. So those companies who produce or recover the gas in Ukraine, should they have the right to get the export license or not? So what do you think? Can we export gas from Ukraine? I think it would be easier to answer your very general question. I'll provide the general answer to that. I would like to come back to the words which our co-founders mentioned or in the beginning of our presentation. Our center in our approaches, we use the certain principles. On the whole, we are for the market-oriented price formation. That's why we actually demonstrate rather systematic approach of ours, but actually coming back to your question, we believe that the state must concentrate upon creating the compensatory mechanisms which were mentioned before, which would make it possible to implement the market prices. The state should not manage the enterprises, but must create the infrastructure for free competition. It must ensure and provide and take into consideration the not so much protected trade of the population. So if there is an opportunity or a chance to export gas, the market decide whether to import or export gas. So remind me about your other question. Ukhrgaz today, in fact, is the subdivision Naftogaz. Ukhrgaz 100% is reports to Naftogaz and has to sell all their gas to Ukhrnaftogaz. So again, this the comprehensive issue should be resolved. Among other things, I do not understand why Ukhrgaz the price between Ukhrgaz and Naftogaz should be regulated by anybody today. I can't understand that. Thank you. We actually taken up all our time. Thank you very much for coming today. Should you have some other questions or additional questions, it will be our pleasure to answer those. Thank you, and we'll be looking forward to see you at our next functions or events here. Thank you.